She does nothing all day, but eats more than anyone else, my son-in-law shouts. In the kitchen, he and my daughter have been sorting out their relationship for the second hour, and I hear all this and don't know what to do, pack up and run away or pretend again after their conflict that nothing happened. I have been living with them for the last 4 years, since John died. I had everything in my life, a wonderful house, a high-paying job, and a daughter whom I gave everything she needed to be happy. She has always been on my side and now also tries to support and protect me from my son-in-law, Sam. She looks after our children. Every day she takes our twins to school, cooks us dinner, washes our clothes. When was the last time you took your suits to the dry cleaners? Mom does all this for you. She's been on a diet for the past 6 months. She doesn't eat with us. She eats like a bird. Come to your senses. All the food you see in the fridge she bought with her own money. Does your mom pay for utilities too? She spends hours in the bathroom. Ask her how many times a week she takes a bath. Showering is much more economical. Sam shouts so loudly that the grandchildren stir upstairs. I was terrified they'd notice me standing at the door eavesdropping. I took a step back and accidentally knocked over his work bag. From there, jars of medicine spilled out, small, amber bottles with familiar labels. My name, my doctor's name. My heart stopped. I took a photo with my phone, gathered them quickly, and ran upstairs before anyone could see me. In my room, I sat down at my laptop and typed the names of the drugs: narcotic, addictive, may cause hallucinations, may trigger severe asthma. My throat went dry. With my weak lungs, those pills were a death sentence. So it wasn't just that he wanted me out of their house, he wanted me gone for good. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the floor, every whisper of the wind felt like him moving through the dark. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my breath shallow. At 5 in the morning, I got up and boiled water for tea, more for the comfort of sound than the drink itself. In the reflection of the kettle, I barely recognized the woman looking back, 60 years old, silver hair pulled back, eyes still sharp but tired. I remembered the day I lost everything 4 years ago, the day of John's funeral. He'd been my husband for 38 years, a builder, a dreamer, a man who made jokes in the morning and coffee just the way I liked it. We built our house together. He drew the plans, I painted the walls, and we both planted the rose bushes out front. They bloomed red as wine every spring. When he died suddenly of a heart attack, I thought at least the house would be my anchor. But 2 weeks later, I learned that John had never updated his will after his first marriage. The house wasn't mine. It was hers, his first wife's. It felt like a betrayal carved into marble. All I got was an apology from his lawyer and a month to vacate. My daughter offered me her guest room, and I took it, believing it would be temporary. 4 years later, I was still there cooking, cleaning, and breathing carefully so as not to disturb anyone. But now I knew the truth. Sam didn't just dislike me, he was killing me slowly. At breakfast, I smiled as if nothing had happened. That was my talent, smiling through disaster. Sam sat at the head of the table, scrolling through his phone. My daughter, poor thing, was buttering toast for the twins, her shoulders tight with exhaustion. I poured coffee for everyone except myself. My hands trembled, but not from fear, from focus. I was already planning. He thought he could manipulate me, drug me, make me seem forgetful, unstable, maybe even dangerous. A perfect setup for an accident, but I'd lived too long and seen too much to let a man like that win. If Sam wanted to play games, I'd show him what happens when a 60-year-old woman stops being polite and starts getting clever. That evening, I checked the old file cabinet in the garage. It contained the original property documents from John's lawyer, the ones my daughter had never bothered to read because she trusted Sam's version of things. But I read every line, every word. Buried in the legalese was a clause about transfer rights upon secondary inheritance. The property had reverted to me, not his first wife, after her passing. She'd died 2 years ago in Florida, which meant, legally and officially, the house was mine. My pulse pounded as I held that document. For the first time in years, I wasn't the helpless guest. I was the homeowner. The next morning, I called everyone into the kitchen. Sam came down in his robe, grumbling. "What have you cooked for us again? The forge smells like a sump." "There's no breakfast today," I said. He stopped mid-step. My daughter looked at me, confused. The children sat quietly, watching. "The kitchen's empty, Sam," I continued. "No pancakes, no bacon, no coffee, but you should eat light anyway. You'll need your strength to start packing. You have 2 days to move out. My daughter's fork dropped onto her plate. Mom, what are you talking about? I slid the papers across the counter. This house belongs to me. Here are the ownership documents. Sam's face twisted into a smirk. You can't be serious. That house was your husband's gift to us. He gave us the keys on our wedding day. No, I said calmly. He let you live here temporarily. I was there. I remember his exact words. You can stay here until you build something of your own. You've had for years. Time's up. He laughed, a short, ugly sound. I'm not moving out because you had a bad dream, Jane. You will, I said. By sunset, I had already prepared. In his shampoo, I'd squeezed an entire tube of depilatory lotion. In his protein shake, I'd swapped out the sweetener for a generous dose of magnesium-based laxative. The dishwasher pods had been replaced with dye capsules that would turn every white shirt he owned a beautiful shade of pink. And because poetic justice requires artistry, I had unscrewed the nozzle of his cologne and added a touch of fish oil, just enough to linger. By the time he'd realize what was happening, it would be too late to wash any of it off. Revenge doesn't have to be violent. Sometimes it just needs to be memorable. When he came out of the shower half an hour later, shouting, "My hair. What the hell happened to my hair?" I didn't look up from my crossword puzzle. Maybe it's stress, I said sweetly. You should try a bath. I hear it's very economical. My daughter covered her mouth, torn between horror and laughter. Then came the second act. Sam rushed into the kitchen, already late for work, grabbed his smoothie, and gulped it down like a man chasing control. I watched the clock. 10 minutes later, he was sprinting for the bathroom like a track star. The twins giggled. Even my daughter cracked a smile. When he finally stumbled out pale and sweaty, he found his work shirts, every one of them stained pink, and his car keys coated in a thin layer of sticky honey. Oh, and by the way, I said, handing him the document copies again, I've already changed the locks. You can pick up your things later, once you calm down. By evening, Sam was gone, humiliated, furious, but gone. My daughter sat across from me at the kitchen table, her eyes red. Don't you feel sorry for us? Don't you feel sorry for your grandchildren? I reached across the table and took her hand. Sweetheart, I've suffered enough under your husband's roof. I'm not throwing you out, I'm setting you free. Here's $4,000. It's enough for a month's rent. You can stay nearby if you want, but you can't stay here. She nodded slowly, tears spilling down her cheeks. He'll never forgive you. That's fine, I said, pouring myself a glass of wine. I didn't do it for forgiveness. I did it for peace. That night, for the first time in years, I slept soundly in my own bed. But I should have known it wasn't over. Sam wasn't the kind of man to lose gracefully. And when a small-minded man feels powerless, he becomes dangerous. The next morning smelled like peace and roses. For the first time in 4 years, I made breakfast just for myself: 2 scrambled eggs, a slice of toast, and coffee in my favorite porcelain mug, the one Sam had once called Old Lady China. The kitchen was quiet, sunlight spilling across the counter. It felt like reclaiming oxygen after years of breathing someone else's air. I stepped outside in my robe and slippers, inhaling the crisp morning. My roses, the same red John and I planted together, were still heavy with dew, glowing against the green. I smiled, touched one of the petals, and whispered, "We did it, John. We took back what's ours." The twins' laughter had faded from the garden. The swing was still. The sandbox was empty. The silence was strange, but not sad. It was earned. I spent the day airing out the rooms, opening every window, playing the records John used to love, Ella Fitzgerald and a little Sinatra. When the last note of "Fly Me to the Moon" floated through the house, I danced with my shadow, barefoot on the hardwood floor, laughing like a woman who'd just returned from war. But freedom, I've learned, always has an echo, and mine was about to roar back. It started with the gardener. Charlie had been with me for 12 years, since before John died. He was quiet, loyal, with a fondness for whistling church hymns while trimming the hedges. That morning, he arrived carrying a flat of new marigolds and a grin that warmed my heart. "Morning, Mrs. Jane," he said, tipping his hat. "Heard the house is all yours again." "It is," I said. "And you can finally dig up that awful patch of weeds Sam wanted to keep," he chuckled. The man couldn't tell a tulip from a turnip. We worked side by side for an hour, pulling weeds and chatting about nothing in particular, until he stopped suddenly. His smile fell. He stared down at the soil near the rose bed. "What is it?" I asked. He knelt, touched the dirt, and sniffed. "Smells off, like chemicals. You see that white crust on the surface? I bent down. The soil looked pale, powdery, unnatural. A faint acrid scent burned my nose. "It's weed killer," Charlie said grimly. "Strong stuff. The kind landscapers use to clear lots before construction." I froze. But no one. Then I saw it. A trail of fresh footprints leading from the side gate to the roses. Sam. That night I barely slept. Every creak of the porch felt like him coming back. I kept the lights on, sat in the living room with a mug of tea, and made a list. I wasn't going to call the police yet. Sam was cunning, careful. He'd do things that looked like accidents. I'd need proof. The next morning, the roses were wilted, every single one. Red petals turned brown overnight, curling like they were trying to hide from the sun. I stood there staring at them, fury buzzing in my chest like a live wire. John had planted those roses for our 20th anniversary. He used to say they were proof that love could survive anything, even storms. Now they were gone, but so was my fear. 3 days later, it rained hard, a storm that rattled windows and flooded gutters. When I woke up the next morning, the first floor smelled like sewage. I padded downstairs and stepped into an inch of foul brown water. I checked the pipes, the drain, the basement pump. Nothing had failed naturally. The main sewer line cap had been unscrewed. The plumber confirmed it. "Someone did this by hand," he said, shaking his head. "Deliberate sabotage." "You got anyone with a grudge?" I smiled, bitter and small. "Oh, just family." He laughed uneasily, thinking I was joking. By the time he left, I wasn't angry anymore. I was cold, precise. I called the security company and installed new cameras around the perimeter, tiny, almost invisible, with motion sensors and cloud backups. I put one inside the garage, one near the rose beds, and another by the back door. If Sam wanted a war, I was finally equipped. 2 weeks passed quietly, too quietly. Then Charlie called. "Mrs. Jane," he said, voice shaky, "the brakes on your car aren't right." "My car?" I frowned. "You mean the Camry? I haven't driven it in months. I borrowed it this morning, remember? You said I could take it if I needed to check on my wife." "She's in the hospital." My stomach turned to ice. "Charlie, what happened?" "There was an accident," he said softly. "The brakes gave out. I swerved off the road." "I'm okay, but the car's totaled." I sat down slowly, gripping the edge of the counter. "Charlie, the brakes were cut, weren't they?" There was silence on the line. Then, "Yeah, looked clean, like someone used bolt cutters." He paused. "Who would want to hurt you like that?" I closed my eyes. "Someone stupid enough to think he's smarter than me." That night, I went to the garage with a flashlight and a camera. The security footage from 3 days earlier made my hands tremble, not from fear this time, but anticipation. There he was, Sam, at 2:14 a.m., in a hoodie, moving with the clumsy confidence of a man who thought darkness made him invisible. He went straight to the car, lifted the hood, and worked fast. The footage caught his face twice, clear as daylight. "Gotcha." I copied the video to 3 USB drives, mailed one to my lawyer, one to my daughter's office, and kept one in my safe. I was done being the silent victim. But Sam wasn't done being stupid. A week later, I came home from the grocery store to find silence thicker than usual. The air smelled sweet, wrongly sweet, like rotting fruit. I followed the scent to the living room. My parrot, Jasper, lay motionless in his cage, a few bright feathers scattered around. My heart dropped. "Jasper?" I whispered, but I already knew. The vet confirmed poisoning, rat bait, cyanide based. Whoever did it had mixed it into his birdseed. That broke something in me. Jasper had been my companion since John died. He used to mimic John's voice, saying, "Morning, Jane," every dawn. I buried him under the withered roses, tears falling on the poisoned soil. Then I stood up, wiped my face, and made a phone call. "Hello, Detective Kearns," I said. "I think it's time we talk about my son-in-law." The next morning, Sam came back, not through the front door this time, through the fence, sneaking around like a raccoon. I saw him on the security feed before he even reached the porch. He was trying to steal my dog, Bruno, half lab, half mastiff. All heart growled low when he smelled him. Sam reached for Bruno's collar, whispering, "Come on, boy, let's go for a ride." The dog didn't move. Then, when Sam grabbed harder, Bruno lunged. I heard the scream from inside the house. By the time I opened the door, Sam was on the ground, clutching his hand, blood seeping through his fingers. I called 911, calm as rain. When the officers arrived, I handed them everything, The video of the brake sabotage, the texts from my daughter begging me to forgive him, the photo of my poisoned parrot, and now the bite mark that placed Sam on my property without permission. It was enough. They cuffed him right there, in the same driveway he used to swagger through like a king. As they led him away, he turned to me and hissed, "You'll regret this." I smiled. "Maybe, but you'll remember it longer." That evening, I poured a glass of wine and walked to the garden. The roses were still dead, but the marigolds Charlie planted had started to bloom bright, defiant orange. As I watched the sunset paint the house gold, I realized something. This wasn't just revenge, it was resurrection. I'd been silent for too long. Now the whole neighborhood knew my story, the police had my evidence, and Sam's arrogance had landed him exactly where he belonged, behind bars. But my instincts whispered it wasn't quite over yet, because men like Sam never stay quiet for long. The morning after Sam's arrest, I woke to the quietest house I'd ever known. No children thundering down the stairs, no phone vibrating with my daughter's half apologies, no snide comments from the man who used to call me the freeloading old lady, only sunlight crawling across the floor and the faint ticking of the kitchen clock. For a few blissful seconds, I thought peace had finally arrived. Then the phone rang. It was my daughter. "Mom," she began, her voice thin, shaking. "What did you do?" I held the receiver with both hands. "I protected myself. You had him arrested. He sabotaged my car, poisoned my bird, and tried to steal my dog. You don't know that. I have video proof." There was a pause, then the soft sound of her crying. "The kids keep asking where he is. They think he's on a business trip. He's where he belongs," I said. "In a cage for once." The next few weeks were a blur of police interviews, statements, and paperwork. I'd never seen so much bureaucracy in my life. Detective Kearns, a weary man with coffee-stained teeth and the patience of a saint, guided me through every step. "Mrs. Hunter," he said one afternoon at the precinct, "we've got him on 2 solid counts, animal cruelty and property damage. The brake tampering, well, that's the crown jewel. He'll try to deny it, but the footage doesn't lie." I nodded. "Good. Maybe a few months behind bars will teach him something about humility." Kearns smiled faintly. "Or make him angrier. Men like your son-in-law don't handle humiliation well." He wasn't wrong. 2 weeks later, I got the first letter. The envelope was thin, postmarked from the county jail. No return address. But I didn't need one. The handwriting, sharp, slanted, impatient, was unmistakable. "You think you've won, Jane. You think you're clever. But people like you always slip. Everyone in town knows you're crazy. Your own daughter's on my side now. Enjoy your victory. It won't last." I tore it in half without finishing the page, but I kept the pieces. I'm not one to throw away evidence. By the end of the month, 3 more letters arrived, each one nastier than the last. He accused me of lying to the police, of poisoning my own bird to frame him. He said he'd get out soon. He said I should watch my back. I filed every letter neatly in a plastic binder, labeled for Kearns. I didn't reply. I had better things to do, like rebuild my garden. The garden became my therapy. Charlie and I dug up the poisoned soil and replaced it with fresh earth. He planted white roses this time, John's favorite color. "Symbol of renewal," he said, patting the dirt. "They'll come back stronger." He was right. Every morning, I'd sit on the porch with coffee, watching those white blooms unfurl like tiny victories. Bruno, my loyal beast, lounged by my feet. Sometimes I'd talk to him like he was John, telling him everything that had happened, every plan I was making for my next chapter. Freedom had a flavor, and it tasted like fresh coffee and justice. But peace never lasts long in my world. A month before the trial, my daughter showed up unannounced. I was pruning the hydrangeas when I saw her car pull up, the twins in the back seat. She got out slowly, like she was stepping into enemy territory. "Hi, Mom." "Hello, sweetheart," I said, wiping my hands on my gardening gloves. "The kids can play with Bruno if they like. They're staying in the car." So that's how it was going to be. She took a deep breath. "Sam's lawyer says you're exaggerating, that you doctored the video." I laughed, short and sharp. "Sweetheart, if I knew how to doctor video, I'd have a YouTube channel by now." Her lips tightened. "He says you've been unstable since Dad died." My chest went cold. "Unstable? He says you were jealous of Sam. That you," she hesitated, "that you set him up." I took off my gloves and looked her straight in the eye. "Your husband cut my brake lines, poisoned my parrot, and nearly killed Charlie. That's not a setup. That's attempted murder." She looked down at the grass. He said you were hallucinating, that you've been taking medication because he drugged me. I snapped. Then I forced my voice calm. I have proof, Emily. Prescription bottles with my name, filled with narcotics I never touched. Ask Detective Kearns. She didn't. She just stood there, arms crossed, eyes darting toward the car. The trial's next month. I'm going to testify for him. It felt like someone had reached into my chest and twisted. For him? I whispered. She nodded. He's the father of my children, Mom. I can't let them grow up thinking their dad's a monster. I wanted to shout that monsters don't stop being monsters because they share your blood, but I didn't. Instead, I said, then I'll testify for myself. Court day came with a gray sky and the smell of rain. I wore John's navy blazer and pearls my armor. Sam arrived in handcuffs, smirking like a man who thought charm could rewrite reality. My daughter sat behind him, pale, nervous. When the prosecutor played the footage of Sam cutting the brake line, the room went silent. The judge leaned forward, squinting at the screen. Sam's face was unmistakable. The defense tried everything, claimed the video was manipulated, that the timestamps were wrong, that someone else had borrowed his hoodie. But when Detective Kearns presented the letters Sam had mailed me, complete with his handwriting analysis, the tide turned. In his own words, he'd written, "You regret this." The judge looked over his glasses. "Mr. Sanders, are you aware this letter alone constitutes a threat?" Sam's smirk finally cracked. "Guilty. 3 years in state prison, with mandatory psychiatric evaluation and a restraining order." When the gavel fell, I exhaled for what felt like the first time in months. Outside the courthouse, rain finally broke. My daughter caught up to me on the steps, her hair plastered to her cheeks. "I didn't know," she whispered. I didn't want to believe. I touched her arm gently. "I know." The twins were waiting in the car again, staring out the window. When I waved, they waved back, hesitant but smiling. As my daughter drove away, I thought about forgiveness, about how it's less about letting others off the hook and more about freeing yourself from their weight. I wasn't there yet, but I was getting close. That night, I poured a glass of red wine, turned on the porch light, and sat among the new roses. The air smelled clean. Bruno snored at my feet. In the distance, thunder rolled. I looked at the sky and said quietly, "John, you'd be proud." I finally stopped letting people walk all over me. For the first time, I believed it. But just as I started to feel safe again, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Enjoy the peace while it lasts. Prison doesn't keep me forever." The wine glass froze halfway to my lips. Sam might have been locked up, but somehow he still had a voice. And I knew this war wasn't over yet. The text kept me awake all night. "Prison doesn't keep me forever." The words glowed on my phone screen, sharp as broken glass. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, just a final bluff before he disappeared into the system. But deep down, I knew Sam was the kind of man who could weaponize even a whisper. By morning, I'd brewed 3 cups of coffee and opened my laptop. If he wanted to play long-distance chess, I was going to make the first move. I started by checking the public prison roster. He was exactly where he should have been: County Correctional, Cell Block C. I called Detective Kearns. "He can't text you," Kearns said firmly. "No personal devices, no internet access. Inmates don't get smartphones." "Well," I said, "either one just grew legs or Sam's found a friend willing to play messenger pigeon." Kearns sighed. "I'll talk to the warden. Forward me the message." I did. Within an hour, I had confirmation. The text came from a prepaid burner phone registered under the name Eddie Walters. I didn't know any Eddie Walters, but Sam did. Eddie was one of his drinking buddies from the old days, a mechanic with a criminal record longer than a grocery list. He'd been at our Thanksgiving 2 years ago, the same night Sam mocked my cooking and called my stuffing dog food. If Sam had a soldier on the outside, it would be Eddie. So I paid him a visit. Eddie's auto shop sat on the edge of town, tucked behind a row of rusting trucks and a flickering neon sign that said "We fix everything." When I walked in, the smell of oil and cigarettes hit me like a slap. He was leaning over a car hood, wiping grease off his hands. "Well, I'll be damned," he said when he saw me. "Mrs. Hunter, thought you'd moved to Florida or a grave." "Neither," I said coolly, "but you might be moving to jail if you keep sending messages for Sam." His grin faltered. "I don't know what you're talking about." I pulled out my phone and showed him the text. "You recognize this number?" His eyes flicked toward the back office for half a second too long. That was enough. I followed his gaze. A phone sat charging on a shelf, glowing with unread messages. I stepped forward, grabbed it before he could react, and scrolled. Half the texts were from Sam. She thinks it's over. Get the package ready. Make her remember who's in charge. My hands tightened around the phone. What package? Eddie swallowed. Look, lady, I didn't mean nothing. Sam said it was just a prank. Define prank. He hesitated. He told me to drop off a box at your house next week. Said it was from your lawyer. I didn't open it. Good, I said. Because now you're going to deliver it to the police station. He laughed nervously. You wouldn't. Try me, I said, smiling just enough to make him nervous. And Eddie, if you warn him, I'll make sure the cops pull your security footage. You'll be the accessory who helped a convicted felon harass a senior citizen. His face went pale. Fine, he muttered. I'll take it to him. Today, I added. The box turned out to be worse than I expected. Inside were photos, hundreds of them. Shots of me gardening, walking Bruno, shopping for groceries, even sleeping on my porch swing. Someone had been watching me for weeks. There was also a note, scrawled in Sam's handwriting. The house might be yours, Jane, but peace never will be. I sat in the police station holding that note, feeling the old anger rise again. Kearns shook his head. He must have arranged this before sentencing, probably mailed instructions from the holding cell. We'll charge him with stalking by proxy. Stalking by proxy, I repeated. Is that what we're calling cowardice now? He gave me a sympathetic look. You've got a restraining order, Mrs. Hunter. The court will extend it, but I'd still be careful. Detective, I said, standing up. I've been careful my whole life. Look where it got me. That night, I installed new locks, stronger floodlights, and motion sensors that would make Fort Knox jealous. I even dug out John's old shotgun, not loaded, just polished. Sometimes the illusion of power is enough. Then, instead of crying or panicking, I poured myself a drink and wrote a letter. Not to Sam, to his employer. You see, before all this mess, Sam worked as a regional sales manager for a company that provided software to the state prison system. I'd always thought it was ironic a man that dishonest working around security tech. But irony can be weaponized. I sent his boss copies of the court transcripts, the police report, and one choice photo from the box. Sam crouched behind my fence at a M. I attached a note that said simply, "Do you trust this man with your client's data?" 3 days later, Sam's employment was terminated effective immediately. A week passed. No more texts. No more boxes. I almost started to believe the worst was over. Then my daughter came by again. She looked thinner, older. The twins weren't with her this time. Mom, she said quietly, sitting on the couch. You shouldn't have gone to Eddie's. I frowned. How do you know about that? Because Eddie called me. He said you threatened him. Sweetheart, I warned him. There's a difference. He said you're obsessed. That you've been making up stories about Sam. I laughed bitterly. Of course he did. Criminals stick together. Her eyes filled with tears. Mom, I just want this to stop. You've already ruined our lives. Sam lost his job because of you. My blood ran cold. Because of me? He lost his job because he's a dangerous idiot. Please, she said, standing up. Just let it go. I wanted to shake her, to scream that letting go is what got us here in the first place. But she was my daughter, John's daughter, and I couldn't bear to see that mix of fear and pity in her eyes. So I said softly, if you walk away now, you'll lose more than you think. She hesitated. Are you threatening me? No, darling. I'm warning you. The man you're defending tried to kill your mother, and he's not done. After she left, I stood in the window watching her drive away, taillights bleeding red into the dusk. I felt something inside me harden. He was using her, manipulating her from a prison cell, twisting her mind until she couldn't tell truth from guilt. That night, I opened my binder labeled for Kearns, added the new photos, and at the back, slipped in a fresh sheet of paper titled Phase 2. Underneath, I wrote 3 bullet points. 1. Find Sam's informants. 2. Cut his communication lines. 3. Show him what fear feels like. Because if Sam wanted to send messages from behind bars, I was about to send one back and mine wouldn't come through a phone. 2 days later, I visited the prison. When the guard asked if I was family, I smiled. Unfortunately, yes. Sam looked smaller in the orange jumpsuit, but the smugness hadn't left. He smirked as they led him to the table. Miss me, Jane? Like I missed the flu. He leaned back. You can't touch me here. Maybe not, I said calmly, but I can touch everything around you. Your job's gone. Your friends are flipping on you. And by the time I'm done, you realize what it means to lose everything. His grin faltered. I stood, smoothing my jacket. Sleep well, Sam. I'll be out there planting roses while you rot. And with that, I left him sitting there jaw clenched, eyes blazing, the image of a man who finally understood he'd picked the wrong woman to torment. But as I walked out of the prison gates, a cold wind blew, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the game wasn't finished. Because Sam wasn't the type to lose quietly, and if he couldn't destroy me himself, he'd find someone who could. You'd think that after staring a man like Sam in the eye and watching him squirm behind bulletproof glass, I'd sleep soundly. But peace, for women like me, is never permanent. It's a truce that expires at midnight. 3 weeks after my little prison visit, I woke to the sound of my phone buzzing on the nightstand. Unknown number again. But this time, no message, just silence on the other end, a faint shuffle, and breathing. Slow, deliberate. Mail. I hung up. 5 minutes later, it rang again. I didn't answer. I just sat there, heart steady but mind already in motion. Men like Sam love their games, the illusion of control, the whisper in the dark. It was theater, really, but I'd learned to be a better playwright. The next morning, I went straight to the bank. I wanted to move my savings, simplify my accounts, maybe start fresh. The teller smiled politely, clicked a few keys, then frowned. "Mrs. Hunter," she said, "it seems your mortgage has a lien on it." My what? Filed 3 weeks ago by the county. And paid property taxes, apparently. I laughed out loud. That's impossible. The property's paid in full. I just renewed everything last month. She shrugged helplessly. You'll have to speak with collections. The amount due is $78,000. 78,000. For a moment, I just stood there, feeling the absurdity of it. I owned this house outright. I'd spent half my savings restoring it after the flood Sam caused. And now somehow, the county believed I owed enough money to buy another one. There it was, the next move in his game. At the courthouse, I requested the lien documents. The clerk, a tired woman with reading glasses and a heart tattoo on her wrist, slid a file across the counter. The paperwork was neat, official, convincing, but the signature at the bottom, Janie Hunter, wasn't mine. The J looped the wrong way. Forged. Someone's pretending to be me, I said, my voice flat. The clerk raised an eyebrow. That's identity theft, ma'am. You'll need to file a police report. I've got practice, I muttered. Detective Kearns looked older when I met him that afternoon, like he'd been chewing on too much cynicism lately. Forgery? He said, scanning the copies. You're telling me a man in state prison managed to file fake tax paperwork in your name? Not by himself, I said. He's got help. I told you he's got people on the outside. Kearns sighed. You think this Eddie guy's still involved? Eddie couldn't spell forgery if you spotted him the first 6 letters. No. This is someone smarter. Someone who has access. He tapped his pen thoughtfully. You're talking about an inside job. Exactly. He looked at me for a long moment, then leaned back in his chair. Mrs. Hunter, there's something you should know. Sam's been on good behavior. He's working in the records division, helps process documents, data entry for county contracts. He's technically not supposed to have any outside communication privileges, but I finished for him. But he's using his access to forge my name. Kearns nodded grimly. We'll investigate. In the meantime, don't sign anything. Don't take calls from unknown numbers, and keep your financials locked down tight. Detective, I said, standing. I was married to a contractor who tried to hide his gambling debts in the utility drawer. I know how to protect my assets. He smiled faintly. Something tells me you always did. That evening, Charlie came by to check on me. Mrs. Jane, you look tired, he said, setting down a basket of peaches from his orchard. Paperwork fatigue, I said, waving a hand. Apparently I'm worth enough to forge now. That's progress. He chuckled nervously, but I noticed he didn't meet my eyes. Everything okay, Charlie? He hesitated. You remember when you asked me to change the locks? Of course. I found something that day. Under your front porch. He pulled a small plastic bag from his pocket. Inside was a black USB drive. I didn't open it, he said quickly. Figured it wasn't mine to see. I stared at the drive. Where exactly did you find it? Taped under the porch light, like someone wanted it hidden but not lost. I thanked him, pocketed the drive, and waited until he left before plugging it into my laptop. The folder opened to dozens of documents, scans of my driver's license, my signature, even copies of John's death certificate. Every file had a timestamp dated 3 weeks earlier. At the bottom of the folder was a video file labeled for Jane, MP4. I clicked play. The footage was grainy, black and white. A man sat in a cell, smirking into the camera. "Hello, Jane." Sam's voice, calm, almost friendly. "If you're watching this, it means my little project's been delivered. I always said you loved playing detective, so here's your next mystery. How deep do you think the roots of this go? You took my freedom. I'll take your name. You can have your house, your garden, your dead husband's roses, but I'll make sure when people hear Jane Hunter, they don't think victim, they think criminal." He leaned closer, eyes burning through the screen. "I told you prison doesn't keep me forever." The video cut off. For a moment, I just sat there, breathing slow, the way I used to when my asthma flared. Then I smiled. "Oh, Sam," I whispered, "you just made your last mistake." I drove to the prison the next morning, not to visit him this time, but to see the warden. The man was polite but dismissive. "We monitor all inmate activity, ma'am. Impossible for them to access external drives." I slid the USB across his desk. "Then explain this. That's your inmate on video, inside his cell, using your equipment." He blinked, swallowed hard. "Where did you?" "Doesn't matter," I said. "What matters is that if you don't shut down his privileges, I'll have this on the evening news before sunset." Front page headline: State Prison Leaks Inmate Forgery Network. How do you think your donors will feel about that? The warden's lips pressed into a thin line. "I'll look into it immediately. I'll expect a call by noon," I said, standing. Sometimes the only way to get justice is to sound like you already own it. By that evening, I had my call. Sam's privileges were revoked, his computer access terminated, his cell searched. They found a smuggled flash drive hidden behind the toilet tank loaded with falsified documents, forged signatures, and correspondence with a handful of external emails. But that wasn't the surprise. One of those email addresses belonged to my daughter. I didn't cry. I didn't even gasp. I just sat at the kitchen table, staring at the printout Kearns had brought over. "Could be coincidence," he said gently. "Maybe he used her name without permission." "No," I said softly. "He used her trust." The messages were full of manipulation. Sam asking for help correcting paperwork, pretending it was for his legal appeal. She'd been sending him copies of my ID, my old mail, things she thought were harmless. He'd used her to build the entire forgery. I closed the file. "That man's poison seeps into everything. What do you want to do?" Kearns asked. I looked out the window at the garden, at the white roses glowing in the moonlight. "Finish this," I said, "once and for all." That night, I drafted a letter, one that would end the game, legally and personally. I wasn't just going to defend myself anymore. I was going to expose him. In the morning, I'd call the local paper, the warden, the county clerk, and Sam's attorney. I'd give them the whole story, with evidence attached. Every lie, every manipulation, every forged page traced right back to his cell. By the time I was done, the world would know the truth, and the name Jane Hunter would shine again, brighter than the ashes he tried to bury me under. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking into his final act. Because men like Sam don't play defense. They burn the board before they lose. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat at the kitchen table, the old clock ticking in the silence like a metronome for revenge. The house smelled faintly of roses again, though none were blooming. It was Memory John's aftershave, the ghosts of peace. But peace was overrated. Justice had more flavor. By dawn, I had printed every email, every document, every photo. I bound them neatly into a folder and labeled it, in bold black letters, "The Sam Sanders file compiled by his mother-in-law. WHO refuses to die quietly." A little dramatic, sure, but I've always believed that when you're telling the truth, a touch of theater helps people listen. At a.m., I walked into the Pinewood Gazette, our small-town newspaper, and slapped the folder on the front desk. The receptionist, a girl barely old enough to drive, blinked at me. "Ma'am, do you have an appointment?" "Sweetheart," I said, "I don't make appointments for justice." 10 minutes later, I was sitting across from the editor, a weary man named Paul who looked like he'd seen every scandal our little town could cough up. I told him everything from the poisoned roses to the forged taxes to the daughter who'd been tricked into helping her husband commit a crime. At first, he listened politely. Then he leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "Do you have proof?" "More than proof," I said, sliding the flash drive across his desk. "I have receipts, footage, handwriting analysis, timestamps, and one recorded prison confession, all in HD. Paul whistled low. "You know this could go viral, right?" I smiled. "Darlin', I'm counting on it." By evening, The story hit the paper and then the local news. Prisoner runs identity fraud ring from inside state facility, mother-in-law exposes operation. They used my photo, me standing in front of the house, arms crossed, Bruno at my side, the headline practically crowning me. The internet lit up. People called me the avenging grandma. Others said I was the baddest 60-year-old in America. My phone buzzed nonstop. I turned most interviews down. I didn't need fame. I needed closure. But fame came anyway. 2 days later, my daughter came to see me. No makeup, no polished hair. Just Emily, my little girl, stripped of the defenses she'd built around that man. Mom, she whispered, standing on the porch. I'm sorry. I said nothing, just let her step inside. The house smelled of coffee and clean air. She looked around like she was seeing it for the first time. The light, the photos of John, the roses and vases everywhere. He said he needed me, she murmured. He said you were lying, that if I didn't help him, he'd lose his mind. I thought I was saving him. You can't save a man who wants to drown, I said softly. She broke then, tears spilling fast. I didn't know he'd do all this. The forgery, the surveillance, he made me think it was just paperwork. I swear, Mom, I didn't know. I pulled her close, let her cry against my shoulder. For the first time in years, she felt like my little girl again, the one who used to bring me dandelions and say, "For your garden, Mommy." When she finally stopped trembling, I said, "You didn't fail me, Emily. You just believed the wrong person." She nodded, voice shaking. "They're transferring him to federal custody." You heard? I did. And you're really done with it all? I smiled faintly. Oh, honey, I'm never done. I just changed the rules. The next week, the FBI stepped in. Turns out Sam's little forgery project was bigger than we'd known. He'd been stealing the identities of half a dozen people, former clients from his software job, a few retirees, even a local pastor. The prison's internal audit found he'd been running his ring with help from 2 corrupt staff members. Both were arrested. Sam's sentence was extended by 15 years. The warden resigned. And me? I finally got my quiet back. But I didn't stop there. While the world moved on, I took one final trip to the prison, one last time. Call it curiosity, or maybe I just wanted to see the look on his face when he realized who'd won. He looked different now, thinner. The swagger had melted, replaced with a hollow bitterness. When he saw me, his mouth twisted into a snarl. Come to gloat? I smiled. No, I came to say thank you. For what? He spat. For reminding me that strength doesn't always mean being loud. Sometimes it means surviving every blow and still standing tall enough to look your enemy in the eye. He slammed his fists on the table. You ruined my life. No, I said quietly. You did that the moment you tried to ruin mine. Then I leaned forward and whispered the last words I'd ever say to him. You tried to bury me, Sam. But you forgot I'm the seed. I stood, smoothed my jacket, and walked out without looking back. The following spring, my garden came alive again. Charlie helped me replant the roses, new soil, new roots, new life. This time, they bloomed white and gold, a mixture John would have loved. I started volunteering at the community center, teaching young women how to protect their assets, recognize manipulation, and never ever hand their power to anyone who doesn't deserve it. They called the class the Jane Method. I told them it wasn't about revenge. It was about reclamation. If someone tries to write your ending, you grab the pen back. You sign your name in bold ink and remind the world you're not done yet. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, my daughter came by with the twins. They ran through the garden, laughing, chasing Bruno, who was still as protective as ever. Emily handed me a small envelope. Inside was a photo of me, framed from the newspaper article, with a note in her handwriting. You were right. He drowned himself, but you taught me how to swim. I felt something in my chest ease, the kind of peace that doesn't vanish when the lights go out. I looked around my garden, at the life I'd built from ashes and fury, and smiled. You know, I said to no one in particular, it was worth it, every second. Then I poured a glass of wine, sat on the porch swing, and watched the sky turn gold over my roses. Sam was gone. The ghosts were quiet. And for the first time in a very long time, I wasn't surviving. I was living. The following autumn, the roses bloomed wilder than ever. Not white this time, no. These were crimson, streaked with gold, as if the earth itself remembered what it meant to fight back. I used to think that color came from the fertilizer Charlie swore by. Now I'm convinced it came from me, my blood, my will, my laughter echoing through every petal. Life after Sam didn't return to normal. It grew into something better, stranger, bolder. For the first time in years, I didn't just wake up, I rose up. It started one morning when I was standing in line at the grocery store, and the woman ahead of me, gray hair, soft eyes, turned around and whispered, "You're that lady from the news, aren't you? The one who got her house back." I nodded, embarrassed. She leaned closer and said, "My daughter's husband. He controls her every move. I wish she had your courage." Her words followed me home. That night, I sat in my living room with Bruno snoring at my feet and thought, what if courage could be contagious? 2 weeks later, I filed paperwork for a nonprofit organization, the Garden Club. Not the kind where you sip tea and gossip about roses, but one where women could plant new lives after someone tried to bury them. We met in my backyard the first few months, 5 women, then 10, then 30. By winter, I had to rent space at the old community hall. Our motto was simple: we grow back stronger. We taught self-defense, financial literacy, and how to read the fine print on a will. We hosted inheritance nights, where lawyers volunteered their time to help women protect their property from greedy relatives. We even started Second Bloom grants, small funds to help women start over after leaving abusive homes. I watched women who'd arrived broken begin to laugh again. They learned to document everything, to speak firmly, to stop apologizing for existing. They stopped whispering. And God help me, some of them started to smirk the way I do when someone underestimates me. Within a year, the Garden Club spread beyond our county. Local papers called it a movement. Someone from a TV station came to interview me, and when they asked why I founded it, I said, because too many women think endurance is the same as strength. It's not. Strength is when you stop surviving and start strategizing. The room went quiet after that. Now I travel, sometimes nothing fancy, just small towns where stories like mine bloom in whispers. I tell those women that freedom doesn't always mean walking away. Sometimes it means kicking the door open and changing the locks. I still live in the same house. The garden's my sanctuary. The twins visit often, they're teenagers now, and they brag about their grandmother like I'm a superhero. Emily and I are closer than ever. She runs the Garden Club's online outreach program. We laugh about the past sometimes, in that half-sad, half-grateful way survivors do. As for Sam, he writes letters now and then. I don't open them. They pile up in a box marked weeds. Someday I'll burn them in the garden, let the smoke rise as fertilizer for the next generation. People ask me how all of this changed me. I tell them I learned 2 truths. 1. Evil doesn't always arrive wearing a stranger's face, it often sits at your table. 2. The only real antidote to fear is purpose, and I found mine. Last spring, we planted a new garden behind the community hall. Every woman who ever attended brought a cutting or seed. We named it the Survivor's Patch. There's a plaque that reads, "For every woman who was told she was too old, too weak, or too late, may she remember, nothing that grows back is fragile." When I walk through that garden now, I see more than flowers. I see stories rooted in defiance. I see second chances, blooming out of ashes. And I swear, if you listen closely on a quiet evening, you can hear the wind carry a whisper through the petals, my own voice, laughing softly. You tried to bury us, but we were seeds all along, the end and the beginning of the Garden Club.